Welcome to Cannabis History, where we explore the forgotten stories, hidden figures, ancient uses, political battles, and cultural moments that shaped the world's relationship with cannabis. Today, we are traveling back to the 1800s, to a time when medicine was changing, empires were moving plants and ideas across the globe, and cannabis was about to enter Western medical history in a major way. At the center of this story is a young Irish physician named William Brooke O'Shaughnessy. He studied cannabis in India, documented its effects, tested its medical potential, and helped introduce Indian cannabis knowledge into Western medicine. So today, we are looking at the doctor who helped bring cannabis into the world of medical journals, pharmacies, and Victorian science. This is the story of William Brooke O'Shaughnessy.
Before we begin, as a reminder, this episode is for educational and historical purposes only. Our goal is to understand the past, not to promote cannabis use or sales. Now let's get back to the video. Chapter 1. The Doctor Who Changed Cannabis History. In the early 1800s, Western medicine was still in a period of transformation. Doctors were beginning to challenge old traditions, study the body more scientifically, and test medicines through observation and experiment. At the same time, the British Empire was expanding its reach, moving not only goods and people across continents, but also plants, medical knowledge, and cultural practices. One of the places where these worlds collided was India, and it was there, in British-controlled Calcutta, that William Brooke O'Shaughnessy encountered a plant that Indian culture already knew well: cannabis. To Western doctors, cannabis was still unfamiliar as a serious medical treatment, but in India, it had a long history. It was prepared, consumed, studied, and used in different forms. O'Shaughnessy saw something that many European physicians had overlooked. He saw a plant with medical potential, and he believed it deserved serious scientific attention. His work would help move cannabis from Indian medical tradition into the Western medical world. Chapter 2. From Ireland to Medicine. O'Shaughnessy was born in Limerick, Ireland in 1809. From an early age, he showed the curiosity of someone who was not satisfied with simply accepting the medical ideas of his time. He wanted to test, observe, measure, and understand. That scientific mindset would follow him throughout his life and eventually lead him into several different fields, including medicine, chemistry, pharmacology, toxicology, and even telegraphy. As a young man, O'Shaughnessy studied medicine at the University of Edinburgh, one of the most respected medical schools in Europe. During this period, Edinburgh was a major center of medical education, attracting ambitious students from across the British Isles and beyond. O'Shaughnessy studied medicine, chemistry, and forensic toxicology, and he graduated in 1829. But before cannabis entered his story, another crisis would shape his reputation. Chapter 3. Cholera and the Rise of Scientific Medicine. In the early 1830s, cholera was terrifying Europe, and people had little idea as to why this illness was spreading. People back then did not know that in most cases, contamination happens when the feces of an infected person enters into the water supply or food sources. It struck quickly, caused severe dehydration, and unalived many of its victims in a short period of time. During this era, doctors did not fully understand the disease, and many treatments were ineffective or even harmful. Bloodletting, purging, and other outdated medical practices were still common. O'Shaughnessy approached cholera differently. Instead of relying only on tradition, he studied the blood and bodily fluids of cholera patients. He noticed that the disease caused a dangerous loss of water and salts from the body. As a result, in December 1831, he wrote a letter that was published in a world-renowned medical journal called The Lancet. In his writings, he argued that cholera patients were losing dangerous amounts of fluid and salts from their blood, and that replacing those losses directly into the bloodstream could help treat the disease. His idea helped lay the groundwork for intravenous fluid therapy, one of the most important medical treatments still used today. Thomas Latta later applied this principle in human patients, but O'Shaughnessy's research helped point medicine in that direction. That detail matters because it tells us something important about O'Shaughnessy. He was not just interested in theory. He wanted medicine to be based on observation, experiment, and results. And that same mindset would shape his work with cannabis. Chapter 4. O'Shaughnessy arrives in India. In 1833, O'Shaughnessy joined the British East India Company and traveled to India. He eventually became connected with the Medical College of Calcutta, where he worked as a physician, chemist, and teacher. India at this time was under British colonial rule, and Calcutta was one of the major centers of colonial administration, commerce, and medical exchange. This is where the story becomes more complicated. O'Shaughnessy's cannabis research happened inside a colonial system. British doctors, scientists, and administrators were studying Indian plants, medicines, and traditions, often translating local knowledge into European scientific language. Sometimes this helped preserve and spread information, but it also happened within an unequal power structure, where Indian knowledge was often filtered through British institutions and credited through British publications. So when we talk about O'Shaughnessy, we should give him credit for his research, but we should also remember that he was building on knowledge that already existed in India. Chapter 5. Cannabis in Indian Medicine. In India, cannabis was not some mysterious, unknown plant. It was familiar. It was used in different forms, and those forms mattered. Bhang was commonly made from cannabis leaves and often consumed as a drink or edible preparation. Ganja referred more specifically to the flowering tops of the female cannabis plant. Charas was a resinous preparation, similar in concept to hashish. And majoon was a sweet, edible preparation often made by combining cannabis with fat, sugar, and spices. To O'Shaughnessy, this was fascinating. Here was a plant with a long history of use, already embedded in Indian medicine and culture, but still largely unfamiliar to Western European doctors as a serious medical treatment. In his famous paper, On the Preparations of the Indian Hemp, or Ganja, O'Shaughnessy wrote that hemp was known across regions including Africa, South America, Turkey, Egypt, Asia Minor, India, and parts of Southeast Asia. He also noted that in many of these places, cannabis was used in popular medicine for a wide range of conditions. But in Western Europe, he argued, its use as either a stimulant or a medicine was still not well established. That became the opening for his research. Chapter 6. Testing Cannabis as Medicine. O'Shaughnessy wanted to know, what does cannabis actually do to the body? To help answer this question, he began experimenting and testing his theories. One of the major areas he studied was tetanus, a terrifying disease that causes painful muscle contractions and could be deadly. He also explored cannabis in relation to rheumatism, convulsive disorders, and the symptoms of hydrophobia, a term often associated with rabies. What made O'Shaughnessy's work so influential was not just that he used cannabis, it was that he documented it in a way Western doctors could understand. He described the preparations, he recorded the effects, and he compared results. He treated cannabis not merely as a folk remedy or intoxicant, but as a substance worthy of medical investigation. Chapter 7. The 1839 paper that changed the conversation. In 1839, O'Shaughnessy presented his findings to the Medical and Physical Society of Calcutta. His work was later published and circulated more widely, including in British medical journals. The full title of his paper was a mouthful, as many 19th-century medical titles were. On the Preparations of the Indian Hemp, or Ganja, Cannabis Indica, their effects on the animal system in health, and their utility in the treatment of tetanus and other convulsive diseases. That paper helped change the way Western medicine looked at cannabis. Before O'Shaughnessy, cannabis was not completely unknown in Europe, but it was not widely accepted as a mainstream medical tool. After his work, Western physicians began taking a much closer look. Cannabis extracts and tinctures started appearing in medical discussions and pharmacopoeias. Doctors experimented with it for pain, spasms, sleep, appetite, and other conditions. This is why O'Shaughnessy is often credited with introducing the therapeutic use of cannabis to Western medicine. Chapter 8. Cannabis enters Victorian medicine. The 19th century was an era of major change in medicine. Doctors were beginning to move away from older traditions and toward more experimental, evidence-based approaches. Chemistry was becoming more important. Pharmacology was growing. Global trade and empire were moving medicinal plants across borders. Substances like quinine, opium, coca, and cannabis were being studied, extracted, standardized, and debated. Cannabis entered this world as both an ancient plant and a new medical curiosity. When O'Shaughnessy returned to Britain, he brought his research with him. Over the following decades, his work would help further cannabis preparations becoming part of 19th century medical practice in Britain, Ireland, and parts of Europe and North America. Doctors prescribed cannabis tinctures and extracts for various complaints, though results could be inconsistent because cannabis preparations were difficult to standardize. That inconsistency would become one of cannabis medicine's biggest problems. Unlike modern pharmaceuticals, 19th century cannabis extracts varied widely in strength. For doctors trying to create predictable results, that was a major challenge. Chapter 9. Queen Victoria and the Cannabis Myth. There is also a popular story that cannabis reached Queen Victoria through the influence of O'Shaughnessy's work. This story is often repeated in cannabis history discussions, especially in connection with menstrual pain. The more careful version is this. Later Victorian physicians, including Sir J. Russell Reynolds, Queen Victoria's personal physician, supported the medical use of cannabis. Reynolds famously praised cannabis when properly administered, and Victorian medicine did include cannabis preparations. But the direct claim that O'Shaughnessy personally caused Queen Victoria to use cannabis is harder to prove and should be treated cautiously. That is why the real historical point is not whether Queen Victoria used cannabis. The bigger point is that by the late 1800s, cannabis had moved from Indian medical and cultural practice into the heart of British medical debate. And O'Shaughnessy played a major role in that transition. Chapter 10. More than cannabis. O'Shaughnessy's influence also reached beyond cannabis medicine. He was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society in 1843, a major recognition of his scientific work. Later in life, he became deeply involved in telegraphy in India and was knighted for his work helping develop communications infrastructure there. In other words, cannabis was only one chapter in a much larger scientific life. But for cannabis history, that chapter remains one of the most important. His life shows how cannabis history is not one simple story. It is a crossroads of medicine, empire, science, culture, and power, all tangled together. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of today's episode. Like so much of cannabis history, this story forces us to ask a bigger question. How many other plant medicines were known, used, forgotten, rediscovered, and then renamed as something new? That is what makes cannabis history so fascinating. Every time we follow the plant, we find another hidden doorway into medicine, culture, politics, and human curiosity. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you're notified when we release more content like this. Also be sure to check out our YouTube channel, Cannabis History, where we explore the ancient roots and modern impact of one of the world's most misunderstood plants.